Okay, so it's 7:05 PM on March 20th, 2019, and I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. We have 2 variance hearing schedules, a number of items of business, and I'd like to announce several items to be added, or possibly be added, as they were not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of this meeting. So I'll go over them, and then we can vote whether to amend the agenda. We have a notice on ZBA petitions for hearings on March 26th, 2019. And then we have 2 disposal works installer permit renewals for 2019.
And one item to be removed is under agent's business number 2. Mark had it on as tentative, but Paul called this morning. He didn't have a chance, or the applicant hasn't given him which direction he wants to go, so he has not revised the plan yet.
Okay, all right. So do we have any other items that have just come up that we need to discuss? No? Do we have a motion to add these 3 items to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Well, let's do the ZBA petition. So we have a 7:30, but we could talk about, actually, maybe we should do 41
Yeah.
North Main, because
And
you
you-
might want to stay here all night.
But you may not.
Maybe you not, yeah. Maybe not. Okay, so, well, we both went to I'll start
Yeah.
with, I met with Sean Kleen of CM&D, or soon-to-be DPW, whatever. And before that meeting, because he had received a proposal from a firm to do the work, what the Board of Health needs for this is an application. We need a accurate diagram of where the testing is proposed. Sometimes there are field changes when you get out to do that, but, and then there's an application form to fill out. There are usually fees, but since it's town to town, we wouldn't necessarily do that. But we don't prepare those plans, we review them, and the agent reviews them for accuracy. And also, once the testing is done, they have to cite exactly where the tests ended up being conducted, as opposed, they get out there and they find there's a big boulder in the way, or what have you. So anyway, so Sean and I went over the proposal, what things were relevant to what we needed, what things weren't, discussed some logistics about disruption of the field, how that fit in with the recreation schedule, and then also some issues of having some assistance with what would it mean to have equipment running over, and this is where, when the agent comes, would be helpful to have him weigh in, but given that they'll be using equipment to maintain the fields and that sort of thing, and ordinarily, you don't want a lot happening on top of a septic field that could compact it. And are those kinds of activities a problem? Yes, no. Would that influence where it might go? So anyway, so that's what we had pre the meeting. And then we were both at the meeting, not really knowing exactly what would take place, but to share the information that we had. And the other thing I did before going to that meeting was to go through what we had on file for 41 North Main for any kind of soil and groundwater testing that's been done and submitted to the board. There may have been stuff done that we just don't know about. And so I went through that. Whoops. Just so we'd know if that was an option for any kind of discharge. And just a quick summary Most of the areas tested that were on record with us were close to North Main, not towards the back of the property, so, but all along, stretching
So
from
sort of all
Hunting
close to
Lane-
where the house is, like where the current system is my recollection.
Well, so,
Or no, is it, I mean, it's like close to the house? I'm trying to remember.
so let's say this is North Main, and here's the property, the railroad tracks are back here, here's Hunting, and here's the edge of the property towards Sherborn Inn. And the testing, right now, I think the system is over here, the house is here, other testing was done here and here. So there's a,
Kind of all the front edge.
yeah. Let's see, I had a summary of what the depths were. All right, I'll just do it by memory, so I'm finding that. But, getting close. Okay. There were, let's see, the most shallow to either bedrock or to groundwater models was 2.5 feet, or just over 2.5 feet, which is not suitable under Title V or Sherborn regulations. And then there was a 3.3, several 3 feet, about a 3.3 feet, a few 4 feet, and a 5 foot. And then there was some testing later where they found slightly about the same and then a little bit deeper. So anyway, it's in that general range of, and it's hard to determine what the extent is to,
Yeah.
but not a large area that has adequate depth to groundwater, potentially, from what we have on file.
I
So
thought my
then the
recollection is they
meeting- do you
did,
wanna-
like, they also did the correction factor. Like, I think they basically had some areas that in theory were workable, nothing that seemed like the general property was sort of broadly workable, and there was some where it was sort of explaining away, this is, 58 inches and it needs to be 60, but we really
Yeah.
think it's 62, where that may or may not be right, but it was certainly kind of on the edges of permissibility for either state regulations and not at the level for
Yeah.
Sherborn.
Also, the ones, so when models are found, that's considered it, you don't have to do an adjustment, that's a sign. But as you said,
Right.
if they don't see the models, then, and they do or don't see water, it'll be adjusted according to what USGS wells have measured in terms of fluctuation of groundwater for similar periods of time and
And there's some
historic.
models that they found that like we don't think it's real. Like there's one where it's like it wasn't really a model; it was really the interface between two soil types. So I think there's assumptions based in some of the numbers that they reported out about what's a real value versus not a real value. And so I would say like my broad interpretation of looking at it was the same as yours, which is it's not clear that there's a massively independently developable septic field there that would be compliant with either state or Sherborn regs. Maybe there is, we don't know, but there's certainly nothing that suggests, no, this is totally unnecessary.
Right.
So that I think then at the meeting, the select board kind of, I think worked to clarify, which is also posted on Nextdoor, sort of after the meeting, saying hasn't been the intent of the select board to kind of leave the impression of support or endorsement, but rather the intent is critical evaluation, and there was kind of a longer discussion there, as well as general feedback that I think everybody there basically said, I don't think the information we have is suitable for a town meeting at this time or in the near future without more specificity. I think there was then some extended discussion of if that's the case, what's the role for testing, which seemed like there was some back and forth about. I think that collectively it's nice to have information. I think it's a question of, in this budget environment, do we spend $5,000 or $7,000 or whatever that number is for information if it's not immediately actionable? It sounded like the feeling was that the bid that came in was high, and there was, I think that, at least my recollection was they talked about doing a rebid. I think part of that was based on Sean, sort of describing that this could be helpful for other things in that area. So if the fire station system fails or other pieces, Although again, it's not totally clear how helpful, like to me, I think it would be helpful in the abstract. They would still have to repeat soil testing unless it's in the next, 2 or 3 years? Like, knowing what the depth of groundwater was 5 years ago wouldn't negate the need to do testing now, would it? If you
I
need to
don't think
replace
so.
this.
That's something I want to ask Mark of, I haven't had a chance to look
Yeah.
up if the state has a different set of rules about how long evaluation, soil evaluation and
think
groundwater
it-
observation is good for.
I think it is good
Indefinitely?
indefinitely
Okay.
unless
I mean, there was a
site
huge
conditions
drought, and now it might
change
even
or.
be back to,
Normal.
might
yeah.
be different because of that, but.
And then I think
Okay,
that,
so site conditions, and then, because I was wondering, how do they view off-site conditions, right?
Right.
There could be changes in
Yeah,
stormwater running on
Yeah.
that didn't run on before, something like that.
and then I think the other thing that was talked about was there's, like, the stormwater recharge, I think was a term Sean used, but that was part of what discharges into those fields. And I think also just understanding what things are currently percolating into those fields is probably the other question that was talked about, but I don't remember a concrete plan for.
Right. And I was also interested to hear that, I guess there's some problem with it, and I wasn't sure what the problem was, but if it's that it's difficult for all the stormwater to be absorbed, then that's interesting information potentially for later, but I'm not sure
Because if
what
the stormwater isn't
issue, we didn't talk.
absorbed, then
What else
how will
could,
everything else get absorbed?
right. So I think that was sort of alluded to, but not discussed in detail.
Right.
And so I think punchline wise, what we said is we thought that there should be an engineer proposing the plans to which the agent of the Board of Health would act on behalf of the board to sort of review those plans, and that testing should be kind of general.
Or on behalf of the town
Right,
at this
on be-
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, again, it's like the agent is a designee of the Board of, like, I think, again, it's not something where I'd expect the town to say, here's the agent that's doing it. I think it's sort of, the agent's doing it on behalf of the parties who are potentially impacted. The town is one of those parties, but I think the agent would be acting on our behalf, kind of as designees of the state. At least that was my understanding. And so it seems like they're still thinking about testing. The last I heard was there was a bid potentially put together for it, although I don't remember that the selectmen said we're going to do testing with that bid.
Yeah, I sent a note to Sean to ask if his understanding was that it's all on hold until we're told to move forward, and I haven't heard back from him yet, but I did just send that this afternoon, so just to clarify that.
And then there was a discussion about whether the land was transferable for that purpose. And that was, it seemed like the other thing they were going to work to resolve.
Let's see. There was also discussion about if the land could be used for that, but was no longer somehow suitable for ball fields, they could relocate the ball fields, but I would assume that would be a discussion with Pine Hill School as well. Because I did check with my child who said that they would walk down for gym and use the field, so I don't know that it could go too far away. Let's see.
And I don't remember any sort of clear follow-up actions for the board to say, here's the next
Yeah.
question for you guys from select board or planning board. Or,
Oh, the one thing they did ask at the meeting that we were treating this more as if this kind of investigation is going to take place, we wanted to participate because we have the expertise in the town, right, through the agent, and because it would have bearing on planning for the town and would like to weigh in on helping to protect public health. But they did ask us if the board supported the effort. They were asking that directly, and I said, we did not vote on that. We are about the technical side of how you do it appropriately, not,
I don't think we
yay
have
or
enough
nay on the
information to
wastewater, so-
opine.
okay.
I mean, at least that's my take is, if you say we can't talk about this for financing, I don't know how we would then have the specificity to talk about it for public health in the absence of soil testing, in the absence of flow volumes, in the absence of, this is the wastewater district. I think it's just too
Right.
abstract for us to have the information that would make it meaningful I mean, at least that's where I'm at.
I agree.
But I
don't
also
know if
think
anyone-
that it's not really our only purpose is how do we do things, how do we make sure things are safe? We're not really interested in what direction a project goes in, it's just.
What does a safe
what-
threshold for it look
what's-
like?
What are the safety issues?
Right, so I think that's, right. Select Board has legal things, but also more policy, same with Planning Board, and I don't really see that as being what we do necessarily, other than in concrete ways of how to plan to protect. So,
I think that's probably it for 41 North Main.
yeah. Yeah, nothing else major, I mean, there were, let's see. I think those were the high points.
Anything about the rate changes? Those are the
Yes.
Yeah.
41 North Main, and the blasting that light presumably happened there.
Yeah, we did discuss them a lot at our last two meetings. We're going to have, we could have that discussion, but I think really the only thing that's come up is, well, actually, we've had some feedback on a few things.
But, well, I think the other thing to know is I think tonight we'll vote on the minutes that reflect all that discussion, and so then those will also be publicly available, and so that would be, I think, another good strategy just about the
Yeah.
back and forth that was had in terms of thinking about notification and testing.
Right, to see where they ended up.
So it's safe to go home to my loving wife.
I think so.
Yeah.
Good night.
Have a good night. Was there any update for the reclassification? That seems like something that we could do in less than 6
Yeah.
minutes.
The only, well, there's a meeting on the 27th, we're hoping, so that we could discuss this. At advisory, one of the advisory meetings last week, I wasn't there, but people were questioning the reclassification and/or increased pay, but whatever. There were questions about it, but it was explained by the liaison from the Board of Health what and why
Right.
this was happening. And at the Saturday meeting, our advisory, I believe, voted to support our budget. I wasn't able to go. I don't know if anybody else was able to go. There, it's a very long day
Another
if you do go.
Benefit is.
So, so that's where we are right now, and then we'll see what happens on the 27th. So,
I have a question, and I guess my question is, when can I ask the question? Because I wasn't able to attend the meeting where a decision was about the proposed regulatory changes.
okay.
And I wanted to know if I could just ask you the question before the public hearing, just because I'm interested, since I wasn't able to attend.
Okay. So let's do that when we're talking about
So,
just some of the questions that we've received. Do we want to, can we fit in?
It may make
Since
sense to
you've been
start
with
and
the-
then, yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to
Okay.
start. Why don't we start with your question, Rebecca?
oh, I was just interested in the, there was a discussion about semi-public water supplies and bringing the testing closer to state standards for following up and evaluating samples after sort of an initial project is put into place. And that was removed. And I was curious why that had been removed. I missed the discussion, I was wondering. But you don't have to share it with me now because.
No, I mean, that should be,
Time to
I think that should be resolvable in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing a summary of,
Do you mind take a shot at it? I could take
My,
a shot.
my recollection was sort of the
minutes, but I wasn't-
ability, was the ability to sort of define a water supply suitably in terms of what brings the specificity that we're targeting I mean, this is sort of my recollection, which is increasingly hazy, but it's sort of the gist of saying being able to define the target of interest and being able to say, how did we pick 20 versus 25 versus 18?
Right, and how could we define a project, let's say, that has multiple wells and is aggregated, but are people just going to then have legal constructs to start
Oh, no, I
dividing it
was-
up? So,
Yeah.
no, but I know what you're asking, why we dropped it. We dropped it because it got too complicated
Oh,
to figure out how to make sure that what we wanted to have happen would happen.
oh, yeah.
Just like the DEP level regulation was, the exception is by having ownership and having, it's one condo complex, but it's divided up into ownership of wells. So we thought, how are we going to define a project, even though we're trying to capture that, the same thing might be done, and we couldn't figure out how
Yeah.
And I
to
think
get to our desired objective.
And I think it wasn't
so
that it was like, we should never do this. I think it was
It
in the
was-
time we have to proceed with the other
At
things.
this time.
Yeah.
Right. So I would
Because-
say, I don't think it was that people weren't like, this is a good thing to do. It was that we're not going to get the specificity we need in the time
Yeah.
we need to resolve.
Because one thing you may or may not know is there's some legislation that's being discussed at the state level right now, which is designed to improve as the development is becoming of higher density all over the state, but also in other states in the country, some of the issues are being faced sort of anew that are public health, and similar to the ledge disruption, potential contamination of drinking water supplies. There's also some discussion of bringing some of the other standards closer to the public drinking water supply standards. And so I think these are subjects that are sort of coming into the radar at the state
Yeah.
and federal level. And I thought it was, so we would be in keeping probably with what's happening outside of Sherborn at the state and federal levels if we were to do that, even though I think our biggest problem is how do you enforce it, who does it, how's it regulated?
But that suggests
stuff
that
like
maybe we could borrow whatever they're
Yeah.
developing
Yeah.
for that and not have to figure it out because, we just thought it would lead to other things and then we'd always be trying to chase after something that was always finding a
Yeah, but I just thought that
way
was
around it.
interesting, and I unfortunately wasn't able to either, so
Yeah.
I would have shared that at the time, which would
Yeah.
have been the perfect time.
Okay.
Well, and again, I think
If you
it-
can bring in, information on that,
Yeah.
that would be good because then maybe we can use that as
Yeah.
the basis for what we're trying to do, or at least start.
And I think like it was definitely something we talked about at some length. I think we talked about it, at the regulations one, and then sort of talked about it subsequently too. And so I don't think the regulations one was taped because it was conflicting with another meeting in here.
Yeah, and interestingly, at the Department of Community Housing and Community Development in Boston, there's been some discussion in the regulatory division, because the vast majority of the projects that are happening under that statute are in areas with public water supplies, but in a few places, like Western Mass, far Western Mass and Sherborn,
Yeah.
there's not regulatory assistance for the boards of health. And so how is it possible to bring the standards up to state standards for residents in affordable housing? So it was interesting because it
Yeah.
was related to a lot of the conversations we were having at the fields.
So it sounds like sort of in terms of next steps, anything that you can kind of, I think there'd be interest, because I think it wasn't that we said this isn't a reasonable thing to do, but more that we got stuck about figuring out
Yeah.
in the time we have how to implement
I
it.
know
and
that
did-
one of the bills was attached, like it was in an environmental bill that was being voted on. I got notified of that recently.
Yeah, but I'd say like whatever.
And
you-
I'll find out
yeah.
from you because I don't know that much about it, and that was one of the things I was going to try to
Well,
learn.
also
so it would be
whatever
relevant
the-
for us.
Initiatives are in other states or
Yeah.
whatever would be helpful. Because we kept proposing ways to address it, and then we
Right.
would find a way to break that down, and so then we'd try again, and we just couldn't come
Right.
up with anything. So, not for lack of trying, we were, oh, goody.
That's good.
All right, so,
Looks like we're
But
at 7.
McIntyre's not
oh
here,
no, yes, I just
which is
noticed.
very unusual.
And Mark, too, we need,
Well, they're not until 7:50.
okay, so we're not ready for, are you here by any chance for the 16 Old Orchard Road variance hearing?
I'm just an observer for that, yes.
Oh, okay.
And the butter.
Okay, so that was scheduled to start now, but the engineer is not here yet, so we'll,
I'll wait,
as
'cause
soon as he's here, we'll start with that.
I'm a casual observer.
Okay. All right, so, okay, anything else on that one? And then I guess, so really the regulation changes are in print and sent off to the newspaper for printing, so, for distribution. Matt's done a little checking, and we've done a little checking on the menthol mint, since we've been hearing some feedback on that.
Yeah. And so I can comment on that a little bit. I think the other thing is we asked Ellen to kind of pull the minutes from 2014 to kind of understand the discussion. It sounds like at that time there was kind of broad support for the regulations from all in attendance, and the meeting closed to applause. So it sounds like there's a somewhat different tone now. I think the things that were compelling is just, the sort of question of why now? And I think it, for me, the part that is striking is just most of the data about the kind of rising vaping patterns is really, I think, the driver for thinking about it is the question of, do we keep this exception in for mint and menthol or not? And so there's a study called Monitoring the Future, which is an annual survey of high school students that kind of reported the patterns of use of different substances. So it ranges from, cocaine, heroin, opiates, tobacco, all of those pieces. And I think that's really striking, where they saw basically a near doubling from 2017 to 2018 in the patterns of vaping in high school students. So it was like from 10% use in the last 30 days to, I think, a 20.9% use or something like that. Might have been 13 to 20, but a substantial uptick. And I think there's a number of surveys with that. There's like some compelling letters to the editor for one of the sub-studies, which basically said, what this tells us is that whatever we're doing from 2017 to 2018 is clearly not working. So I think that provides a sound basis for saying, why are we reconsidering regulations from 2014? I think it's that the data about this, particularly affecting young adults, is pretty pronounced. And then there's also was a request for comment from the FDA in March of last year that was basically outlining, again, the discussion of the FDA's essentially considering rulemaking around flavored tobacco products. And so they lay out background for that, which again highlights, I think, the data that we've seen that flavored tobacco products, which would include mint and menthol, but kind of also contains the other ones that were previously banned in Sherborn in 2014, definitely disproportionately affects young adult users, both in adolescence and young adulthood. And so again, from a sort of ambivalence about the data appears fairly clear that there's a valid reason to revisit this discussion, both specifically for menthol and mint, and in the context of a dynamic public health issue that does reflect some urgency. So, but it was...
Right, I think there is new data, is what I recall hearing at the Dover Board of Health meeting, where a doctor who works on this issue in the state was presenting information, and they've done studies.
Yeah, and that was the keynote speaker at the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards meeting in the fall, was Cheryl Sabara, who's the...
I think she'll be in
worked on
attendance.
this the legislature. She's actually really knowledgeable, and
Yeah.
I wonder if we might even want to ask her.
No, she's going to be there on the
coming.
3rd.
Oh, that's
She's
what you said.
coming.
Oh, that's fantastic. So
Yep.
that's great. She's a really good speaker, but it's also really
Okay.
interesting.
And so again, I think from a kind of a question of the basis for many of the decisions we're faced with. The data here seems pretty clear to me. So I look forward to a good discussion on the 3rd. I think I'll have a lot of different points of view represented, but from a sort of public health standpoint, this doesn't feel super subtle.
And it's the young populations that are so vulnerable.
Yes, if people start smoking before, I believe, 22, or if people don't start smoking before 22, they are less likely to ever start smoking. So that's why these years are critical.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is that 1 joule is equal to 20 cigarettes,
Yeah.
a full pack of cigarettes. And
But much
these
cheaper.
12-year-olds are,
So I went to the Juul website today because I was curious, and they've got a
Inhale.
cost calculator. So if you smoke a pack a day, by switching to Juul, you'll save $1,700 a year. And so again, I think that we also think about the various strategies that have been done to make cigarette smoking less appealing, and to kind of, if you look at the cigarette data, there's this long, steady curve kind of going back to the 90s. And there's lots of strategies that have led to that curve. And I think that, again, this sort of impacts us. I think, again, should be a rich discussion in a few weeks.
so we'll see a decrease in lung cancer and an increase in, tongue
Dan
and
McIntyre.
throat and palate cancer.
Yeah. Mark?
Maybe not lung,
Yeah.
depends how far.
I think we just don't know. I mean, I think that was my takeaway.
Lost one.
Good catch.
Wasn't bad out of all. Thank you.
Well, that would be the acrobatic portion of tonight's meeting. Well,
see if
we
I
hope
can-
that's the only acrobatic portion.
See if I can get a hold of the engineer.
Okay.
Hey, Joe.
Doing pretty well here. All right, let's do some short ones, just in case he walks in. How about the disposal works installer permits?
Okay, they're both renewals. First one is Holliston Sewer Service, Aaron Campersall. He only renews when he has a job, so,
Okay.
Anyway, okay.
And
and that's
worked
what
in
they-
town before, in good standing?
yeah, it's a renewal.
Okay.
He's in the parking lot. He's on his way.
Oh, all right, great.
So,
So, any other questions from anybody on that? Or do we have a motion to approve the disposal works installer permit renewal for Holliston Sewer Service?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
conditional to a pre-construction conference.
Additional to pre-construction conference. Let's revote.
All those in favor?
Yep, with that amendment.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry. Sign that.
Okay.
And then, the second one that came in today is Ryan Boyd, who has been an installer in the past. Mark, did you have any issues with him? Ryan Boyd for his,
Pre-construction conference, and we'll make sure he, understands the importance of being timely.
Okay. Was this the person before who was relatively new to this?
He was about 4 years ago, but he has been around enough now to know the ropes.
Okay.
so
Okay,
then-
so do we have a motion then to approve this permit for Ryan Boyd permit renewal, conditional to pre-construction conference?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Here's that one for your signature.
Okay. And so we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement at 16 Old Orchard Road. Do we have all the green cards?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll open the hearing. The engineer will be presenting the reasons for why the variances are being requested. If you want to come up and look, because he's going to lay out some plans here and explain. And it can be easier to understand when you're looking at the plans, so. Hi.
Dan McIntyre representing homeowners, 16 Old Orchard.
Duncan. No, that's okay. Okay, no, that's fine.
Yep. The one I marked up's in the office. good to bring it out, but it's pretty much system that's in there. Area, what's stream under the roadway.
Oh, you're the butter.
We have these as a public hearing so that abutters can come, because,
This hole wasn't the best.
Years ago in college, and I lived to
This
see
way.
local government in process.
yeah. And since we're varying our usual standards, that's why we want people to have the opportunity to comment, and
And also, when we have to sell our house, I want to know we're up for also.
true.
Keep your fingers crossed.
Okay.
So just to orient, this is Old Orchard Road here. The driveway comes in. Oh, it's this road. A wetland along the road.
Pretty tough slope.
Drainage just goes under the driveway. It's a much larger wetland up the back of the property.
Probably played in water
Just off the
as a kid.
property line, right about here. The existing system comes out underneath the slab. There's a tank here, and then it goes off to leaching pits in the backyard. It looks like there was kind of a fill here in the backyard on this steep slope. So we're trying to take advantage of that existing fill and put the system kind of back in about the same location, although it's going to be larger. We're not going to put this back in. So we're going with an Elgin trench system, because we are asking for a couple of waivers related to setbacks for wetlands.
Yep, see, good, I didn't know that.
Setbacks to groundwater, so we want to go with a treatment type system. Because of the elevation difference, we can't raise the plumbing in the house because it's underneath the slab. So we did need to add a pump chamber to pump this up. But the yard won't really be mounded, it's gonna be still a fairly level yard.
Okay. So, I assume Conservation has already seen
Yes.
this, and so,
Yes. Yeah, they
even
have.
though we do have the rules about wetland setback, we do defer to Conservation's expertise on that in terms of approving it. And when it's an issue of not many other places to put it, and it's an existing house, that's why we look at variances at all. If it was new construction, it wouldn't happen, but since the house is already there, if we don't allow some kind of septic system to go in, and we do, the engineers have to explain every variance they're asking for and why an alternative wasn't possible. So we want to improve the overall condition and not make someone's house and property completely worthless by being uninhabitable any longer because it was permitted at a different time. So that's the general gist of why we look at these things. So I don't know what kind.
Well, so we're
Yeah,
asking
so-
for a number of waivers.
Right.
One is groundwater offset, it sure is 5 feet. We're actually go down to 4 feet on that. The Elgin approval allows us to go to 2 feet. We don't need to do that here, but we would like to try to get that extra foot to try to minimize the amount of mounds we have right here, so we don't create a drainage problem right here.
I'm kind of curious. So I don't know what the nature of the failure was of the old system, but if you put a new system in the same spot, are there any issues with the soil's ability? Like, are they all filled up with material from the old system, or?
That can be an issue with sometimes, but on this one here, where they had leaching pits, it's just in those areas where those pits were,
Okay.
that were clogged up.
Okay.
So those are concrete, perforated concrete pipes that we're just gonna have to take out and replace them.
Okay.
Should put their garden there.
The contaminated soil will be removed and they'll have to replace that with sewer gravel.
Okay.
So the groundwater offset is one waiver. Also, in this hole up here, we did find some shallow ledge. That's the only hole we found it in. Sherborn requires that we be, 6 feet off the ledge? Almost 6 feet, about 5.5 feet there. So we were asking for that.
Okay, and that's at one end.
That's just at one end, that's
And-
just right here.
Okay, so it would be not directly below any of the lines, but, or you don't know for sure, I guess,
Well,
right?
if
Don't
we-
know where
if
the
we
ledge
carried that
goes
test
to.
pit out, It might be under line
Yeah.
one.
Okay,
It wouldn't be under the other line.
okay,
So I just wanted
Just
to-
barely.
okay.
The well offset, again, as you said, this was done at a different time where they had 100-foot well offsets, and that's what we're gonna have to keep on this one here. We just can't go any further to the wetland because of that steep slope. So we're asking for the waiver from 125 down to 100 feet, which is the Title V. And then the wetland offset would require the 125 feet. We're at about 76 feet at the closest point to the wetlands. There was a two-level conservation commission, and under Title V, that wetland offset is a 50-foot. So we're asking for that waiver as well. And I think overall it's an improvement on what they have.
Right. Not having the pits in the ground is a big step in the right direction, so, because it'll distribute the material more, and actually with a pump chamber, so it'll be pressure dosed as well?
Dosed.
Pressure dosed, yes.
Okay. So the material should be spread out pretty nicely through the system rather than put into two very limited
Right.
locations, so.
But Dan, you are using a distribution box, right?
Yes.
You'll go out by gravity flow is
Yes,
what's
it's
going,
not pressure.
Oh, it's being,
it's being
pressure
dosed up to the D
pressure.
box.
okay, okay.
But at the same time, it's going into an algin system, which is a treatment system to some degree. It treats at the leaching field versus not just in the tank. You also get secondary treatment in the leaching field.
Okay,
But it does get a good slug of water to the D box, which will distribute it to all 4 trenches, rather than the gravity system, which is kind of trickle flow out there.
okay.
And you're
Mark,
dosing-
any,
I'm sorry,
any
you're
other?
dosing 4 times a day? I believe you had a 6 rate? Yeah, I think you're dosing, because of the perk rate, it would dose 4 times versus if it was a better rate, then you dose less. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Oh,
to
I was just
interject.
asking if there were any other comments you had in particular.
No,
about this.
it's, in my view, it's conservative. The engineer, Dan, had noted that, he's 4 feet to groundwater, so that's even a benefit, because he could request 2 feet. So, if anything, I think they're being, to some degree, Dan's being to some degree conservative, understanding how close he is to the well and wetland resources.
Okay. And the reason it's ending up with requiring this is because there are just various restrictions on the property and setbacks from things that ends up, you have a big property, but the area that you can actually work with ends up being much more limited. Any,
It's pretty obvious with this, it's gonna go right to the wetlands, so we wanted to try to treat it as much as possible.
Yeah. which I'm sure Conservation will be happy about, so. Any other questions from anybody? Any questions?
Oh, absolutely not.
Oh, okay. All right, so we're going to then, we'll just go through each one. If anyone thinks of another question as we're going through, you can certainly ask it. So, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01, which has to do with the offset to groundwater? We require 4 feet is being provided, which is consistent with the state's Title V.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.02? And this regards the depth to ledge. We require 6 feet, and 5.3 feet has been provided at just one trench. This is an issue 4 out of the 4 trenches.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.1A? This is for well offset to be 125 feet, and 100 feet has been provided for the on-site well. Just regarding this, there are also setbacks from neighboring wells. We prefer, if we're going to grant a variance to a setback, that it be to the on-site well, because hopefully people will be motivated to treat their septic system and what they put down it well, appropriately, properly, because they'll likely be the first ones drinking it, so, drinking the groundwater affected. Okay. Again, that 100 feet is consistent with Title V state requirements. Motion, anyone?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And last, we have, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2, which has to deal with the setback distance from wetlands to the leaching system.
So moved?
Second.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so I will close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
Conditional to the deed recording. I gotta
For the
stop looking
IA?
at Matt, because he's gonna make me smile every time I do this. And the IA technology deed
And garbage
recording.
grinder, I
Garbage
presume.
grinder.
Yes, and
Okay,
the innovator alternative.
all right, so do we have a motion to approve the plans, subject to receipt of deed restrictions for the IA and garbage grinder?
So moved?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
much.
Have a good night.
And my apologies for being tardy.
No? Okay. We're
We made up for your
on
lateness by
schedule.
finishing early.
When we have our house up for sale, I'd like to know.
No.
Control.
That's how you know you've got happy abutters.
Okay, so it is,
Yeah, we're up hill.
Little competition going on here, huh, guys?
that's good to know. All right,
It's something to do eventually, we're gonna have to move.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Neighborhoods change over.
okay, so it's 7:50, and we have a variance hearing for septic replacement at 240, good night, nice to meet you, at 247 Washington Street. So
Sure.
are the green cards already?
We did get them.
Don't take it
abutters?
personally.
Did you ever get that last card back? I mean, the one, it doesn't. No, but but that one that went to Dallas, it's gone all over the place. It's been everywhere. And they moved somewhere else, and it's been going around the country. But the attempt was made.
Yeah. Once you're into your third state for where the green card went, you're like, I'm doing the best I can here.
Here's the house lot.
Okay, so this is 247
Fields right next to it.
This is right, this is the house right next to the new 40B going in.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Sherborn. You see the cars parking here if you've been by there on your way to Holliston. This is a 3-bedroom, single-family home. It's got a failed septic system down in this valley portion in the backyard here. The on-site well is in the front yard, about 10 feet off the steps. Runs along the east side of the property, all the way up to Washington Street. In order to try to avoid a bump, we are testing down in this area. We encountered what we expected. This is going. It's a medium sand with a very fast perk rate, less than 2 minutes an inch.
Wow.
Given that, the local requirement is a 150-foot buffer for less than 3 minutes, which doesn't leave us much room. So we just kept it down in the back here. We're still outside the Title V 100-foot buffer by 4 feet. We're at 104. No variance to groundwater. We're at 5 feet. We maintain that. The homeowner would like to add an extra bedroom, so we did design it for that. And he also wants to keep the garbage grinder, so it's designed for 4-bedroom and garbage grinder.
And I'm sure you've had the discussion where garbage grinders are
Yes.
not good for their septic system.
Right.
So, okay.
Especially when you're putting it next to your own well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But
the house is, yeah, it's,
and especially when you have the experience of replacing your septic system
Yeah.
already, so, anyway.
Can I ask
Okay.
a question?
sure.
So if he were to be willing to put in a system that had a pump, could you do it without variances?
It's just without it, you mean with a pump?
With a pump, sorry.
Yeah, I
Don't
don't
forget
believe,
you're going, no, except this isn't gonna be higher than.
yeah,
downhill, but it is
if it's higher than, if we put it, say we put it over in here and we were outside,
Yeah.
the buffer is up in here.
Slope.
The radius actually becomes
Yeah,
175.
it's very limited.
The well is then lower in the system, so the road is higher, so it's, the buffer would be out, so it would still require a variance, the same type of variance, but we would have a pump. So I guess the answer is no.
So
We could
there's,
we could never, we couldn't get away with, on this site without a variance.
You'd have to move the well to get a,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is
Right, and-
because of the well.
so having no, you prefaced your first sentence with, in order to avoid a pump. And so I
Oh, okay, I see
was
what
wondering
you mean.
if you
Oh, if we-
hadn't have tried to avoid a pump, which I understand the benefits of avoiding a
Right.
pump, but if you hadn't needed to, there wasn't another solution that was good anyway.
Right, exactly.
Because the well's up front, and he doesn't have enough room up front to stay that 150 feet. And in this case, it might be 175, because now the septic's going to be uphill from the wells, so the lot's
Right.
just not big enough to have that opportunity.
Yeah, so it doesn't, so overall, this is better.
Right.
And you didn't have another alternative that was better anyway.
Yeah, there does not look
Squeezing it up here
like to be
somewhere,
done here.
here, but then you have to be 175
okay.
feet from this well. And they
The only, I've got no concerns. I am just thinking about the property with the barn. They got rid of the garbage grinder. I just want to make sure we're consistent with past precedent, which I
Even
think we
there,
are.
you gotta
You
wanna
was
send
that
it to
house
the,
that was the barn that had a
chief,
bathroom
yeah.
put into it.
Yeah.
Took out the garbage
You'd have
grinder.
the
Then just said, here's more bedrooms. In terms of both preserving a garbage grinder and giving more bedrooms, presumably if someday the next owner says, oh yeah, I don't want a garbage grinder, then now this is a 5-bedroom system. And we'd come back for another hearing where the general intent is this, right?
Oh, because they're resizing the system
Yeah,
essentially?
right now, they're going from 3 to 4, so they're maxing out right now.
Yeah.
But if they then said, okay, we'll take the garbage grinder out, so that.
And that's
would-
up to the board to, at that time, make a decision,
Okay.
but I think that
In general, the
could
board-
create a
Right.
precedent,
And
so.
the difference then for that South Main Street property was that there hadn't been a plus 1 bedroom in
Yeah.
considering the
Yeah.
removal of
Yes.
the, okay.
Right.
So I think that's the difference, because your board basically says when you have a failed system, you can add a bedroom.
Yep.
Somebody wanted to come back later and say, I'll take the garbage grinder out. It's not a failed system. They're
Right.
not entitled to adding a bedroom.
Yeah,
So your own regulations would preclude that.
yeah, that sounds fine.
And it's, yeah, it's rated as a 5-bedroom on record. It is tricky,
3-bedroom
but
going
it's
to,
a
3 going to 4.
yeah,
not a
okay,
five.
sorry.
Where is Washington Street?
This is the old well, I had to cut it
Yeah, so,
So it's
yeah,
down.
give me a,
right here. If you've gone by there, it
Where's
almost
the
looks like
house?
the cars are parked in front
but
of
where's the
site.
septic going in?
Right in the back, right here.
So it's here.
Yes.
So the new big project is here?
It's
There.
all back in
Here,
here,
okay.
yeah.
And behind the property.
Yeah.
So will this be on the same side as that development?
Um,
Mhm.
There will, yes, there will be a house. Yeah. It's gonna be surrounded, well, on one side,
And so he'll be a 4-bedroom system?
but yes. There'll be a house.
It's awesome.
So when have people been able to reclassify their systems? You know, saying we overbuilt and,
I don't know if anyone's come back to do that, except for the systems that were built in the 1980, 70, 80 period, when they used to be supersized, I would say, compared to, you know, the standards of today. So, that's the only time we've allowed it.
And then they were built without variances at that point.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be the difference, is no
Yeah,
variances.
this is going, there's a good point. This is getting a waiver, so.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? There's, you know,
Just-
remarkably
but-
little space to work with on this.
Darrow, to that note,
Oh.
say if they wanted to move their well someday, there would be new construction, because then they wouldn't have any waivers. The only waiver here tonight is the well. They have the 5 feet to groundwater, because it's all sand and gravel. There's an esker pretty much. So they could come back someday and move the well to the correct distance of the 150. If they did that, then yeah, they could add additional bedrooms or remove the garbage grinder if that's
They
the
would have
wish
a
of the
fully
board.
compliant
Yeah,
system.
because they're not in any way involved with that 5 feet to groundwater rule
Mhm.
because of the type of soil.
Okay. Okay, anything else, anybody? Nope? Okay, so do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1BC?
So moved.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
That one's not either.
Okay, so close the hearing, and are the plans ready for
Yes.
approval?
Yes, they are.
Subject to?
Nothing.
Nothing. How about that?
They're pre-construction, but
Yeah,
we
there
don't
you
have
go.
it at this point.
Garbage grinder allowed. I think in a year and a half, this is the first time I've had one where they had a garbage grinder go in.
Yes. All right, so do we have a motion to approve the plans?
So moved?
I'll second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Do you have anything else this evening? No?
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they do?
You guys want to hang out the 210?
No,
Oh,
that
you
came
didn't?
off.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't you see
Oh,
it?
knocked them off, okay.
Paul called earlier.
Okay, I'm sorry, I guess they don't.
Okay. All right, so Mark, let's run through your business then.
Good night, guys.
You want to see
Night.
my neighborhood? The fields of Sherborn I have on the right. They are applying for, at the fields, they're applying for finished basement rooms. But I went back, Ellen did a great job researching the minutes, and again, it's that total count that we're looking at. But they're both the same, I'll show you the plans. It's quite a bit, I think it's 700 square feet of basement, finished basement.
Yes, it was an irresistible amount, and they're walkouts, are they
Right.
not?
On the backside.
Yep. Okay.
So, pretty much, these are blocks of buildings, and this is 30, and this is 32. And the same for the other two, I can show it to you. They're mirrors of each other. Not mirrors, they're actually duplicates. And wherever you see the blue line, that's with the finished space. They're doing half baths versus full baths, but they're doing half baths. As far as I can see, I think that isn't a shower in the middle of the floor, I presume not, but I can check to make sure. But it's almost the same thing.
Right, it would be, there's some,
Well, these
in
are-
Europe, sometimes there'll be, everything's tiled in the bathroom, and then the shower is just there without any surround. So,
But that's what they're proposing.
all right, and how does this fit into the overall scheme
Well,
of
we,
the
the
house?
board, when reviewing this 2 years ago, had noted, and let me just pull those minutes, that there were going to be some four-bedroom units that would have to be accounted for. So, with that said, it's when we get to the point, Ellen, I don't know if you had the chance, at 76 total bedrooms, is it? Did you see my, I had left Ellen a note last night, and
No, I
I
did
didn't
not.
see her
I
since.
did not see the note.
Okay, so the, I'll just show you what I was asking, is that there?
Yeah, I did not
The
see it.
minutes of that same, it's
Yeah,
the same
then-
date, so reflect 76 bedrooms, but then in the decision, it shows 96, and whatever it is, there's a number of bedrooms they've been set to have. And then what the board did back in February 29th, leap year, 2016, is reviewed this, and when they did, one of our members did question the all four-bedroom units. And basically, It was viewed that a motion was made that at a minimum, each unit is viewed as a 3-bedroom, but it could also be as a higher count. It was seconded, and the higher count would be to a 4-bedroom unit. So, with that said, I'm gonna need to see again the entire plan, and if this makes it a 4-bedroom unit, that again is, do you consider this one room, or it's a big room? It's,
Yeah,
or do you want to consider this 2 rooms? That's another reason why I'm bringing it to the board.
it's an apartment.
And then I did talk to the building commissioner, and he said, and he gets the feedback from the builder, I think, and he said, well, they may consider deed restrictions for the bedroom. And I said, well, we usually don't allow that. He said, Mark, you gotta remember, this is different from others.
Yeah.
And so I said, I
Yes.
understand where you're
In
coming
what way?
from. It's a 40B.
No, the court
Yeah.
determined that
Well, because of that.
deed
yeah.
restrictions were
Oh, and
possible,
that I didn't realize, that was already made, that decision.
which in a town that's sewered is a whole other agreement than in a town that
Isn't it on
relies
the
on.
master deed?
Yeah,
It's
it was
on the
supposed to
master
be.
deed. It's not like individual deed recordings, right?
I don't remember exactly,
Yeah.
but, so I guess 2 things, I guess we need,
And that says 96 and this is 76. We'll get that figured
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Do you
that-
remember if it was 96? I thought it was 76. 96 would have brought the count over the 10 pounds.
But
So I believe, I think that's just,
yeah, I think we might have come up with 96 in our counting,
Oh.
possibly, that might be the,
so
I
there's
don't
some
remember the
questions
numbers,
at hand,
right.
but now they got an active building permit that I have to resolve within 30 days, and so.
okay, when did this come in?
It came in
So-
last week, so
Okay.
that's, and, you know, obviously I'm gonna start getting some.
So I think
some
we need a
consi-
couple of
I'll
things,
tell you
right.
exactly. That-
We need to understand, is this one of the
It came in
previously,
the 5th, actually, the 5th of,
Oh,
to me,
okay.
it got here a little later, but it came in
Okay.
the 5th.
so we don't have a lot of time. Is this one that was going to be counted as 4 bedrooms? And then how does that fit in with the deed restriction? And this might require some town council help, it seems to me, right? To go through their,
Just to digest it, to make sure that master deed, that we're following suit in.
and are we
starting to add
keeping
up the
things
rooms.
tallied properly to however
Exactly.
that was set up?
Yeah.
Which pretty much went out of our hands at some point. And I guess could be a question for ZBA, maybe they know,
Because they were the final
because
say.
they were, right, they were in charge, so maybe that's the first step.
First
then-
CBA, or-
Yeah,
I think this is, the testing
so-
waters, this is the building's GH9, and this is part of GH9, so this is, I think this is building name, if I'm not mistaken.
So I guess the question is, if we're now 15 days into the 30-day period, what do we need to give to, like,
A response, if we're gonna approve these, or put them on hold until further evaluation by legal or ZBA.
right, so
There's
we
some
do have the
options.
meeting on the 3rd,
I suspect
which
that
will
will be.
just squeak right in under the 30 days. But
it's gonna be a busy
I sort of
meeting.
worry about having something that may be more substantial.
The
but-
building commissioner can give more than 30. I don't know where that is in writing, but that's what we've always been told.
Okay.
So I wanna make sure I sort of
I'm wondering if there's some way for you and Ellen to craft the questions to ZBA, you know. I guess you'd have to look at what is the upstairs, or are they all either 3 or 4, and does this make this a 4? It seems like we'd still need the floor plans for,
Yeah, we do have.
Whatever
the
model
building
this is going to be.
commissioner Has them in his office, that's the
Okay.
problem, so I don't have them available to you. But I
Yeah.
did review them about a month ago, excuse me, when they first came in. And I remember either 3 or 2 rooms above this first floor, and then usually 2 to 3 on the first floor as well. So anywhere from 5 to 6. This makes 7, so if you're looking at strictly as, you know, room count, that's one thing. And I do have to ask the question, why did they put, is that a floor drain, or is that, what is that? Why did they put an X there in the
Right.
box? I know it's
And-
not a depot, that's how they define a depot.
I'm not so
Or is it
sure
a
we
shower?
want a floor drain,
Yeah, I would wonder what
unless
that
it's
is.
tied into the system.
The only thing I can think of that is indeed a shower that's gonna be put in here, and they could, you know, I need
Oh.
to find that out.
Yeah.
This is a full
Right.
bathroom.
I mean, so if it's a full bathroom or like a three-quarter bathroom, then it would say that's a bedroom by Sherborn regulations, right?
Yep.
And so, and is that, how does that address the deed restriction question? Like, does the deed restriction say you can just deed restrict no matter what the characteristics of the room are? Because if you say I've got a private entrance 700 square foot room with a three-quarter full bath, at what point have you rendered deed restriction into absurdium?
Unfortunately, in this, the authority was taken out of the Board of Health hands, so I
Right.
think,
So
we'd have to pose it to ZBA. I think we have to, and then they can decide if it also requires town council weighing in, because,
And so who's the decider? Is that the courts or is that ZBA? Like, when we sort of say it was taken out of Board of Health's hands, whose hands did it end up in?
ZBA approved it finally in the comprehensive permit.
right, because we were instructed
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's back in our
that deed
hands
restrictions would be okay. Did they mean for deed restrictions to extend to something that looks just like a master bedroom suite,
So
or
it sounds
not?
like our clarifications are clarification from the applicant about, walk me through those bathroom plans. Is this a full or three-quarter bathroom? If it is, that's one of the questions probably for town council in terms of at what point does a bedroom no longer get turned into a office be a deed restriction? And then and in terms of the question for ZBA, is it also that question?
And how this fits in if by room count or by bedroom count, this turns into the equivalent of using up one of their 4-bedroom slots, how does that fit into the overall plan, and how is that being tracked to
In
make
terms of
sure
how-
that
oh.
all of them don't turn into 4 bedrooms, kind of thing? So,
And so then as next steps, Mark and Ellen will sort of draft that communication based on this discussion for ZBA. And then
And CC the building commissioner.
and CC the building commissioner. And then in terms of the 30-day clock, does that have to get resolved by ZBA within
I
30
think
days?
if we put, that we don't let it rest for
Right.
30 days. I
Right.
think that's what I remember it as. And the other comment I was gonna make is if they're gonna have ejector pumps, then that has to be completed by a plumber to prove that and knowing the way the system's gonna work with all the plumbing outside and the roads, I'm sure the pumps they're using, that flow will be reduced, but they gotta prove that to me. So that'll be a technical thing I can easily put down as a concern, that they produce technical information.
It sounds like we have a
on
question on
flow.
the sort of ejector pump that we'd also want clarification from the applicant. And then we'll go to ZBA. ZBA will opine, town council will opine. And is there anything in terms of operationalizing the town council question? Like, does that have to get,
You need to vote.
we would need to, so I guess we can vote in the event that ZBA can't answer this,
Yeah.
then we need
we'd want
town
timely
council.
town council guidance
Yeah,
given the.
and then, okay, since we're not meeting, the question would be, we could frame it such that either Ellen could fill out the form and send it in saying, only, we don't know exactly what the question is because it kind of depends on the details that get fleshed out.
Well, the larger picture that you mentioned is tallying that, I wrote vote, I meant number of bedrooms. You know, how are we gonna continue to tally this so we
But I
don't
think it's a
forget?
question of how ZBA is going to tally. If they're the if they're the ones adjudicating it, then
Yeah.
it's a question of like, we're totally happy to do it, but if we're powerless to affect something, if it then says, oh, this is now past your tally, like,
What do you-
does it make sense for us to do it to then say we've got a problem versus somebody else to do it? But I guess it would have to come to us.
Or that it has to be kept track of, I feel, is almost our
Tracked.
role, right?
And that
To kind of say,
deed-
this is
if they're
the
allowed
agent's.
deed-
Right.
And if they're allowed the deed, then the tally and the deed will blend into each other, where it says it's only a 3-bedroom, even though it appears to be a 4.
But we also just want to make sure that that doesn't get lost by people saying, oh, they could deed restrict it, but they forgot to, or whatever, so.
Yeah, and who watches that? Do we get the deed recording, or does
Well, I
ZBA?
think CBA is my guess, so that's what, I'd start with them.
Yeah.
So, does anyone want to frame a motion for how, if they go to ZBA with questions and they can't provide the answers, how we authorize Mark and Ellen to,
Seek
Does this
necessary.
Craft
have a
the
time-
question
Does this
to-
have a time limit on it, like the other things, where if we don't respond by a certain date?
that's what he
When
was
is
saying,
that?
30 days.
No, I've already,
30 days from when?
I already put comment, the
But-
board's gonna review it. So there's been comment added to these control forms that right here is like, that would be reviewed by the Board of Health. So tonight, I'm gonna leave an additional note for the building commissioner, so he knows that we're actively reviewing this. We didn't let it sit for 30 days.
Okay.
He already
But
knows
also,
we-
if this is being, if this project is being monitored by DEP, maybe the question goes to them.
No,
Because
they're not
they're-
monitoring
The
it.
fields, it's a public water supply.
But this is septic.
But it would affect the water supply since the septic system is upheld the rules.
But I think you'd have to say it was a non-compliant septic system. Like, I think right now, that's the question, is it compliant or non-compliant? Like, I don't know that DEP would say, there's a compliant system, so here.
No, like, what I'm saying is that if the number of bedrooms changes and the amount of septage increases with the design, where the septic systems are uphill of the wells,
Yeah.
it might be relevant.
My 2 cents is, so I think that's a great point in terms of just thinking about who's the regulator. I think for this, it seems like, I can take a crack at the motion if you can resurrect it if I go off track.
Okay,
So
go, Ellen.
So I think, so I move that if the questions of room count and deed restriction integration are unable to be resolved by the ZBA to authorize Ellen and Mark to put the question to town council in terms of, first, whether there is a threshold characteristic set for a given space such that it can no longer be turned into a non-bedroom via deed restriction. So, for example, if you have bunk beds and a full bath, but you say it's a weight room, does that still pass muster based on the judgment that the court's made in terms of the deed restriction? I don't think you have to give that example, but you know, if this is a bathroom with sort of bathing facilities, Sherborn regulations, that would be a bedroom. And can the deed restriction in and of itself, independent of room count or other considerations, turn it into a non-bedroom? And then I think the second question is, I guess that's a part I'm struggling with.
Preserve it as a non-bedroom.
Right. Preserve it as a non-bedroom. I guess the second question is, I mean, I guess we don't really have a town council question for who's responsible for monitoring the room count. Like, that's for us to kind of figure out with ZBA. Are you thinking about this, or am I thinking about this? That doesn't seem like a town council question.
Yeah, somehow I think, I guess it would be only if ZBA says not our thing.
Right.
If part of their answer is, we can't answer that, but we also and/or can't.
You could just make a motion to authorize me to go to town council if needed.
Okay.
That sounds even
If
better.
after-
So
Okay,
moved.
so we don't have
After
to
we get
specify
the-
exactly.
yeah.
Okay.
what-
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Perfect.
for this project,
All right, to resolve the questions that we
questions,
have,
if
which is,
ZBA can't answer them, yeah.
can that be deed restricted and is anyone keeping track of how many 4 bedrooms? Okay, so,
It also might be because if we express that we believe that this is potentially more complicated than it could appear, that would allow us to stop the clock so we could properly evaluate. Right, they need a statement, a
But
simple statement that says this is more complicated than it appears, might not be insubstantial.
But I guess for me, if you say, yes, you can deed restrict anything, then it doesn't seem like the technical elements of the project are complicated, right? It's then, you've got a 700 square foot furnished.
Right, no, I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah.
that. What I'm saying,
Is-
I
is there-
understand that because of the time limit, like from a all they need from us is to say it's insignificant or it's significant, and if it's significant, then then they can stop the clock and allow us to properly evaluate it. If we don't say that, then they can run the clock out. And assume by our lack of
I don't know,
statement-
Mark, how does that usually
I,
work?
since the zoning board is handling this, I don't know if it's really their decision.
Yeah,
You know,
No, but they're asking us if, well, what I read in,
I know, we're kind of the advisors
Yeah.
on this.
unfortunately, all these type of projects, we are the advisor. Even
they
though,
just need to know whether we think it's substantial or insubstantial.
correct, and then how it's going to be addressed, if it's substantial, and is it going to be per ZBA's decision? And it sounds like the court's a deed recording to limit the amount of bedrooms based on maybe a room count that's over. If that's their decision, then that's their decision. I don't know if we can change that. It's just I'm bringing this to you, one, to make you aware of it, and two, I would find direction, and I think that direction, as I thought it would be, back to ZBA.
Okay.
From what I read, but maybe it's the other project, but from what I read, they're asking us, is this substantial or not? And all they
No, I
that
know
was
think
on,
that's-
yes, that was on Whitney.
Maybe fine.
And that was because they were trying to decide whether to have a public hearing. They
Okay.
were not going
Sorry.
to if there was
Sorry.
nothing considered substantial, so.
Okay.
And then we will be
I
talking
didn't know
about
where you
that
were. I
one
know
soon,
what you're
too.
talking about.
Okay, so the only thing I'm worried about is if ZBA feels they, or the building inspector, somebody feels that we have to have a decision by the 3rd, ZBA isn't able to answer us, then we have to go to town council, and hopefully things can move along quickly, so that if you have to come to us on the 3rd with something,
I don't think the
They
time
do-
clock for him is to approve it. I think it's for us to respond, so it prevents it from sitting on the table.
okay,
Now, there's an issue that needs to be resolved, so I think the time clock stops
okay,
until that issue is resolved.
all right.
Not an issue per se, but something needs to be addressed. And that something is these finished basement rooms.
Okay,
Are
so
these finished
do you
basement
feel,
rooms?
okay, so you have what you need to?
Yeah, I have direction now.
Yeah.
This is new to me too. It's, especially when the courts are also involved, you know, in
Right.
decisions, and
Do we
see more and more of these.
authorization for the,
Yes.
speaking of town
Yes.
council?
Do we have a motion to approve the authorization mentioned earlier? Ellen and Mark to approach town council?
I move to authorize Ellen to communicate if indicated with the town council.
And I think it was Amy Questle, wasn't it?
She was
She was the
involved
one
in
who did
project.
this okay.
So
And
moved.
Barbara, but she's not.
Yeah, she's not there anymore.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good luck, Mark.
Thank you.
And, okay. So that's, both of those have the same situation. Are these the first plans that are coming in?
We
the
did see the
buildings?
original building plans, and that's why
Yeah,
these
plans came
buildings
in
G, H,
for,
and I.
for,
first
and
three.
they were approved for just the shell.
The shell, but then they
outside.
came back
They
for the
came back
rooms.
for to do the inside. You
Yeah.
haven't approved them yet, though.
Oh, okay.
They- they did
I
ask about
probably
them.
saw the plans, because someone brought the plans to me.
They have
Could have
been
been
in.
them,
They
but that's why I
did come in
remember
and ask.
5 to 6 rooms. They're unique, they're not unique in any way, but they're either 3 upstairs or 2 upstairs, and then the downstairs changes, but they're all gonna be boilerplates, pretty much. You know, they have, I think, 3 or 4 styles that they're looking at. And the building you see built closest to the street right now, closest to the septic, that is the building we're talking about. That's building I. That's 30 and 32 Southland, I think it's called.
Southfield.
Yeah, Southfield. It's just the beginning.
All right. Let's see, 17, either 17 Unity
Yeah,
Lane or
17
17 Brook Street, whichever.
It's amazing how these numbers sometimes, like 51,
Which are
you
you
get
doing?
259s at the same time. I'll do 17 Unity Lane. The reason I'm doing it, it's very simple at this point. The applicant was asked to provide, and it's Gary McLaughlin, he builds a lot of barns in town. He did actually 26 Bullet as well. And I went up to the site, I never knew this house existed. I thought it was the other one that's up on Union Lane. And they want to convert it to use from, they want to change the use from a house to functions and events and so forth. Working farm for people to see how that works as well. Problem is the engineer, I know the building inspector tried his best to give a summary of what they're doing, but he didn't see the septic plans. I showed them to him. So it's really not ready because I need that engineer's review and to indicate that indeed there's enough sewage flow there to do what they're proposing, which is the pretty much functional facility. So until I get that, I thought I'd have it by tonight, I mean, that's why it was on the agenda. I was trying to help.
What you should be aware of then, hang on a second, I have it. Hold on a second.
If you want to see it.
Here. In the Sherborn link, they're already advertising. They have they're having
That's
a
interesting.
session starting April 2nd through May 7th.
Next week.
90-minute sessions which include lecture discussions and physical group exercise, qi, gong, or meditation.
But they've been doing it for a long time.
They have? Oh.
Yeah, they had a sign
Yeah.
up there this winter.
Oh,
Someone
They have
mentioned
a
this
lot
to me.
of,
But that has not been permitted.
right.
They're not.
So here I'm thinking they need it for this session, but
But you kind of need for the last session.
moving on.
Okay, so maybe
We jumped the
they,
gun, it sounds like. You know,
But it sounds like they're
so they
trying to
might
get it
need to
resolved
get
now.
porta potties out there for,
Yeah, they should be
running.
using this house for any type of change in use until it's approved. You know, and hopefully it'll work. I'm not trying to jinx them in any way.
it's a
but-
beautiful
Yeah.
antique house that
Yeah,
they
this is-
restored, and,
But again, it's just
So we basically need the plans to be able to open
the
it.
engineer's overview, review of the septic design, which we have on hand. We do have it on file. I showed it to our building commissioner, who, he tried his best to do what the engineer has to do.
Yeah.
And he actually underestimated. I said, Chris, it's actually bigger than what you thought. So the septic was, so
Yeah.
I showed it to him. But again, I'm wishing them the best. But and the other thing too, I think they had a recent Title V. That'll be up to the board if you want to approve the Title V inspection. I think it's 2 years old, but it did pass. So. but
okay,
I'm
so
waiting
there's
for the-
design and there's also
Did you
whatever the
call?
new
Yeah,
use.
Gary and I met here. I spoke with him.
What about the owner though?
Well, I've been going through Gary,
Yeah.
so we'll make sure the owner knows too. I've been going through the builder. That's lately how we're doing things here, is the building commissioner makes more or less these applications are set to the responsibility of the builder. So, but we can involve a response to the owner too. I don't even know if the owner knows we're discussing this tonight.
Is this going to need any DEP approval for change of use?
If the match is okay and they're not undersized in any way, I don't think they will, except potential if they use the kitchen as a commercial kitchen, they're gonna need an external grease tank, and I talked to them about that too. So, I'll find out tomorrow.
because
why
they're
they-
not, everything they do, as far as I know, is small scale. And they,
But you still want to make sure that you're not crossing the threshold.
no, I
for,
understand,
like-
I'm just saying that, I don't believe that they're changing the structure, they're just changing
No,
the use
no,
of the
they're just
structure.
trying to change the use, they may change access
Yeah.
to the house for handicap accessibility and
Right.
all that.
And this is like the discussion we had once before about, you can have a wedding at your house and have a lot of people who are using your facility, but once it's a business activity, then it's just, you have to start accounting for that. So it's,
It's not as easy as just renting a tent to have a wedding at your house. But they said the work is limited to adding handrails leading to the third floor, modifying door and threshold at the egress, adding rubber mats and edging per plans, but substituting rubber for plywood, 2 layers, and slope walkways. So most of it is being done, but the major change is it's not a house anymore. They want to use it as occupancy for functions. So it's a major change, a change in use. So
Okay.
we're dealing with it right down here in North Haven too, the same situation, just the reverse.
Mhm. Okay.
So I'll remind them that, as I told them back on March 4th, I would put it on the agenda, but they don't have the engineers work to us yet.
Okay, so then 17 Brook Street?
That plan has been resubmitted as a septic plan. This was that cabana, I didn't realize it was outside.
Yeah.
Beautiful cabana, now that I see where it's behind, it's beautiful. But they are needing to tie into the present septic system. So this is the septic plan. There's the open cabana with just the back wall being enclosed, and the open kitchen and everything, except the bathroom, obviously. And there's the pool, and then the line from the cabana, septic line, to the septic tank is right here. And the plan came in already once, and I asked Bruce Salick, who's the engineer, to show a profile, a cut profile of the pipe to make sure it had the 2% slope, as well as when it enters. When I do the pre-construction, because he was redesigning it yesterday and I only saw it online, is he needs to get this T more under this cover so it can be maintained if need be. That's a minor change, that's just an extension.
But that is really important, because
Yeah,
otherwise you have people
exactly.
entering a confined space to
Yep,
try to
yeah,
do
you
work
want
on
them-
that.
You don't want that.
Nope.
So it's easy to do. If this T's in the way, they can go right aside of it. That doesn't matter too much.
No,
And,
that's a good catch.
yeah, and instead of going through the house, they're going directly to their own septic tank, which was a fairly decently modern system. It's not that old, so I recommend approval of the septic plan as presented with pre-construction, obviously, as we always do. And that's
Pre-construction and a
application.
receipt of a revised plan?
Well,
or-
the
or
as-built,
just-
when you
okay.
do the as-built.
Okay.
I have to inspect, so make sure that T's under the septic, under the cover.
Okay. So anyone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Excellent. Let's see, so we have, all right, let's do the ZBA. So we have 2 ZBAs, one of the upcoming, and then the other has to do with, fortunately, Ellen happened to notice online, I guess, was it on the
Yeah.
town calendar, that the ZBA was having the hearing about Whitney Farms. Unfortunately, we did not get the usual notice, like this kind of
Never
thing.
even-
So I took a look, and there were a few things I thought were relevant to the Board of Health. And those were that they were shifting around some of the structures, not a lot, but still, Mark always has to check. Setback distances, did that push a line to be too close to another line, water to sewer, what have you. So I just sent those 2 concerns to them. That was the one. And then the other is that the owners of Whitney Farms want to put in irrigation wells in the overburden. And so there were 2 main reasons that I was concerned about that. Our lengthy discussions about irrigation wells. And the other is that is the aquifer that they'd be tapping into is the one that Holliston uses for its public water supply wells, some of its public water supply wells. It has a number of them all around town over there. And when this project was going in, they were concerned in general about how the wastewater discharges might impact those wells, and also the draw from the aquifer might impact their wells. I don't know. I don't recall what the analyses were on that. I wasn't on the board at the time. So they went ahead with it was sort of a preliminary hearing to determine whether the changes being proposed in this notice of project change were significant enough to require a public hearing. And so I think they were able to move ahead on the others, except for these items. So they would like our comment. And I think they're planning to have this on April 4th, right? Isn't that what it says on here?
Yes.
I have something else scheduled that night that I would rather not miss, a work-related function, but, so, I think the structure thing is pretty straightforward, that, just like,
Sure, it's,
have a chance for you to review it.
yeah, not interfering with anything.
And the other piece about the wells is Sherborn has a groundwater protection bylaw that is not under Board of Health regulations, it's under the town bylaws. And when it was first done, my understanding is, part of the motivation was that the state was asking towns to look at how their activities within their borders might affect the wells, the drinking water of neighboring towns that had public water supplies or wells into aquifers, and what kind of protections could be afforded. So part of what our bylaw says is, talks about restrictions on what you can put in those areas, like not a dump, not heavy industry with some kind of discharges. So there are a number of things that should not be cited within the Zone 2s. And in the spirit of that, but I haven't pulled and reread the bylaws, but the question is, do you want to allow irrigation wells into something that's the water supply? And I believe that the project is in the Zone 2. So around a water supply well are two zones. Zone 1, which is the absolute protect under all possible circumstances, don't build anything within the Zone 1. The radius of the zone, it's just a circle, is determined by what the volume is being pumped out of that well. And then it's a protective area, no use of pesticides in that area, no parking lots, no buildings, if they're being built today. And then the Zone 2 is usually an irregularly shaped area around the wells, and that is done by hydrogeologic analysis to determine, when you start pumping those wells, where are they drawing from within the aquifer. So,
Could I just ask like a clarifying question? I mean, like, doesn't the Sherborn regulation as it currently exists just explicitly say no irrigation wells?
I don't recall. I don't know.
Wasn't this like our discussion for the Woodland project, was like, you know, I'm trying to remember what the irrigation well discussion was, or was it that?
Well, we require a greater distance, 150
Yeah.
feet to any other
Yeah.
well. So the plan they gave us, I'm trying to digest it. It's too small to, we hopefully get a bigger plan. But the board's looking at discussing irrigation wells in public hearing that we're having on regulation review.
Are
And
you
now-
asking about
Well,
our
I'm just trying-
regs or the groundwater protection bylaw?
Well, I guess my question is in terms of what the question is that we are the opiners for to inform ZBA. Like, what's the thing that's asked of us? Is it confirm the plans meet the setbacks? Is it, you know, the plans are compliant with Sherborn regulations?
They weren't really asking us.
It's just we're-
I mean, they were asking for input by virtue of this notice that we didn't yet, but we have access
Right.
to now.
Yeah.
And they have held off their decision, so we're just advising that before they approve this structure relocation, it would be a good idea to make sure that it's still.
Compliant with the
Yes.
groundwater bylaw that was. found.
This structure is more related to water and septic,
Okay,
in terms of, have you put a building too close to
like you're no longer meeting setbacks or
some
offsets.
kind of tank or something like that, right. So that one is, to me, pretty straightforward, just make sure nothing's gone awry, that you're not now having a water supply line that's slipping in underneath the sewage line, that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, and if I can, Matt, I think you might be under 17.6, what we say is wells used for drinking water and domestic water supply, which they have separate wells for
Yeah.
that, shall not be used to provide water for groundwater, heat pumps, water cooling, air conditioning, or irrigation.
Okay, but in this case, you're saying I've got a separate dedicated.
They want
irrigation
separate
well.
ones. Yeah, they already are drilling, believe it or not, deep wells, which is a good thing down here for the present
Okay.
domestic use. But they're planning irrigation wells, overburden irrigation wells, so. And that's how they're working within our regulations, I believe.
And so our point is that we need to see where the irrigation wells are on a plan size plan. Or we
We
recommend-
don't,
I
we
don't
don't
even
have the
So,
plan, we don't have, this is just, what
I
they
saw
didn't give
Zone 2
us
here. I don't
anything, this
know
is
where
just
it
printed
goes.
off the website,
Okay.
the town website. They never, haven't given us.
We should
any-
ask for a large plan. It's hard to read that.
But, or is it for us to have a large plan or for ZBA to look at a large plan to ensure that it was?
Well, ZBA, since it's a 40B, Whitney
Yeah.
Farms is a 40B, it's kind of up to them, we can advise them
Yeah.
and say, for all the reasons that we've been discussing with people, why we think irrigation wells are not a good idea.
It's going to take you say here.
So to me, there are two levels. If we think it's not advisable, they should be able to use the wells they have. They've got wells, they have one well for every dwelling
Yeah.
at the moment, so,
Yeah.
And then it's also the question of like
Whether they
if
can-
Holliston bans, like if you have a drought and Holliston says you can't use your Holliston water for irrigation, but Whitney Farm says Sherborn has no such bans, so it's a general we don't have a common aquifer that we're banning around,
yeah,
or a public water supply
right.
through which to manage a ban. Then they can sort of be taking Holliston's water despite Holliston having a watering ban exclusively for the purposes of irrigation.
Yeah, right, so is it a good idea to,
They could have a green
and in the
lawnmower.
spirit of our groundwater protection bylaw, should we be thinking that it's okay here? And especially, I mean, we haven't passed the regulation yet, so, but if we do, you know, we're thinking that this would not be a wise course of action in general, I think, so.
Right.
Right, it's not.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that's our guidance to ZBA.
And Jeannie Guthrie did tell me today that she is notifying Holliston of this hearing too.
Oh, good. That's great.
Absolutely,
When you look at 17.6,
good, because she
Second-
asked me, and I said, yeah, I thought it would be a good idea
Yeah.
to tell them.
on the second point that maybe is more important than what I just read is that it says any well used for such systems, that would be the irrigation,
Yeah.
pump systems, shall be approved by the Board of Health only after the applicant has submitted evidence to the satisfaction of the Board of Health that such well will not disrupt any quantity or quality of water from any nearby well to satisfy the manufacturer's recommendations for proper equipment operation is the second part.
Yeah.
So you do have a right to review it to make
Like
sure
I was
it's not
saying, like
affecting.
if you're in zone, it's tough to argue if you're in zone 2 for the other one, that's not considered a nearby well, given it's a different
It's under 17.6.
category.
So you do have that right to look at
Yes.
it, see if it's affecting other wells. It doesn't say Holliston or Sherborn, it just says
Right.
other
Yeah.
wells. So you have something to work with there.
Okay, so then the question becomes, do we write this up and send it? Is there anyone who can go to this meeting?
One clinical service and we'll have spent the day before with you all. I think I'm unlikely to be able
Yeah, I
to do
know,
both.
that's the other. So,
Do we all want to nominate Lisa?
What about writing it up and then, no, but what about writing it in a very brief way, and then
oh, you know what?
also trying to
We
go.
could actually, wrote something much longer than this email at first. I mean, not much longer, a little bit longer. Could finish that up, and then bring it for the 3rd. And we could vote on it and then
Communicate.
deliver it to them.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. Okey-dokey. Let's see.
Is that?
And now we have the March 26th notices. My only comment on these were as long as they're not, it says to maintain a professional office building and to maintain or to operate automotive repair, that as long as they're not changing the activities significantly, that would affect how much?
They're both renewals,
Yeah,
so
so it sounds like
pretty
it's,
much
yeah,
same.
okay,
Yeah, I think that's what that typically means.
okay. Does anyone else have any issues? Excellent. Oh, look at this, there is some very slight chance of your target. So now we have nomination of an inspector of animals.
Yep.
Has something happened?
No, you do this every year.
Okay,
Every
right,
year she's
that's-
not, you
There's not a
nominate, the
resignation
state
or something.
appoints,
Oh, okay.
so.
I thought we did that when the board changes
No,
over.
no, you do
This
it,
one's
no.
different.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's for the state. They appoint her from May 1st,
Oh, okay.
April 30th.
Oh, all right.
There we go. No better time to reappoint Dana.
Okay, and is it Kim Morrow?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a motion to nominate Kim Morrow for Inspector of Animals?
So moved.
Second.
And any changes anything we have to do?
No, No,
Okay,
I
so
send the
job
form-
description, assignments, all the rest same?
no, because it's what she's required to do by the state.
Okay.
So I send the form to her, she has to have it, sign it, notarize it, send it to the state, and they'll send her a little card,
Oh, okay,
an appointment.
all right. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So I think, agenda items for,
I guess the only question is, other than the discussion we've had so far, anything else for the regulation changes? We sort of had talked about the public water supply, we talked about the menthol. Do we have any other discussion we need to have for the regulations?
about?
Yeah, I can do that right now.
Place for this?
Not
For
a sick with
the
the-
regulations, regulations, there was one, I was looking for it when I read through, there was one word, like, is it too late for wording?
We can't change it
It's
now,
not a
but at the hearing,
substantive
we can
change.
bring it up for changes.
It's not a substantive change, it was, probably I can't find it.
You know what?
We can just bring it up
If you bring it at the hearing, because we wouldn't change it now anyway,
Okay.
so.
Perfect.
Okay, well, I can't think of anything else besides what we've already discussed, and that will be a busy night. Okay, so, Rick, if you want, we're just going to do approval of Warren's payroll, signing of approved plans from this evening, and minutes, so, thank you.